Hi everybody, my name is Callie Muniz, and the topic that I'm doing today is I'm going to be talking about blood spatter, and although that's not something that I can visually represent to you guys, it is something that I can explain along with pictures and a lot of definitions and a lot of explaining to do. But basically, the basics of blood splatter is to study and analyze bloodstains at a known or suspected crime scene with the purpose of drawing conclusions about the nature, the timing, and the main details of the crime. In other words, basically a special team called forensic specialists would be coming into a crime scene, and there they would be trying to draw conclusions or figure out exactly what weapon was used, the trajectory of the blood, and the objects that have blood on them to potentially see if they can figure out what had happened exactly at that time rather than waiting and trying to draw conclusions further, possibly pushing the investigation farther. Two basic blood types that there are is the angle of impact, which is basically the angle formed between the direction of a blood drop and the plane of surface that it strikes. And it's pretty self-explanatory in the title of what it is. Angle of impact is basically the angle at which the person was impacted. And then the other one is called a cast-off pattern. And with that, it is a pattern created when blood is released or thrown from a blood-bearing object in motion. So for example, let's say I were to hit somebody with this candle. I were to swing down over and over and over, but throughout that process, the more blood that is gathered on this object would be flung backwards. So for instance, if I swung down and flung my arm back, there would be blood casted off onto that back wall, potentially my mirror, my clothes, and a lot of my shoes. Now, if I were to swing this way and I were to swing down and swing up, the blood splatter would then be projected off onto a wall. So basically, those are two basic, easy forms to understand a little bit more about what exactly blood spatter is. A lot of things that they do for trying to figure out the crime scene is a few basic steps, and one of them is cutting out a bloodstain area. And with that, they would be using scissors, and as you can see in this little pack, it's a basic starter kit pack. Pretty much everything you need would usually be in that type of pack, and they carry that with them when they come onto the crime scene. But you would basically use scissors, a knife, any sort of sharp object, and let's say this target was covered in blood. They would then cut around the unnecessary parts that they don't need and save the actual blood spattered piece, and then package it into evidence, and then put that evidence into another piece of a baggie. When that baggie is done, they seal it off and put it into a actual paper bag, and then they put an evidence sticker with the case number, or whether or not it's the first, second, third, fourth, fifth object. They put the number down to indicate what object was picked up at one time in numerical order. Another thing that they do is they photograph a lot, but it's not used with a basic camera. They use a very high-tech camera, and the only reason why they do that is because they want to get very clear images of exactly each single splatter of blood. And although it seems like a lot, it's actually very useful because on basic camera qualities, it looks like a lot of the blood can be fused together into one. And that's not what they want, especially when they're trying to figure out a homicide or a murder. In that case, they would rather be able to exactly see every single blood spatter object, how much of it, how big of an area it is. And for example of that would be, let's say there was blood on this side of the plant. They would take an up-close picture so that they can get every single detail of the blood splatter. And then they'd take a few steps back, take another picture, and then they'd take a few more steps back and take a picture of it again. And it's basically just to see the sum of blood on that object and to see exactly how much blood is on there, how many individual droplets are on there, or if it's a cast-off pattern where a bunch of blood has spatted onto the plant. Another thing that they use, which I pretty much talked about, is the bags of evidence. I've pretty much explained that, so I don't think I need to go over it again. But they also use Q-tips. And with the Q-tips, what they would do is, going back to the plant, if there was blood on this, they don't want to touch it. They don't want to take the whole thing. But if it was a glass piece, they don't want to break it or dismember it in any sort of way. So they would get a Q-tip, rub it around a little bit, get one side completely drenched in blood, grab that toothpick, put it into a tube, close the capsule, and then they put that off to the side. Once they're done with that, a person will then either sit there and try to run it through their computer system, or they would take it back to the lab and they would actually analyze the blood spatter, along with exactly whose blood it is, if there's mixed blood, or the basics of that. And the biggest thing that they use is strings. And although it seems kind of weird, the strings are actually very useful in that aspect of trying to figure out what exactly happened at that time of murder or homicide. And basically what you would do with those is, wherever the body of the individual was lying, they pinpoint it exactly in the middle, connect however many strings you have, it depends on the amount of blood that is in the room, but they would connect every single string to the little pinpoint that's pushed down into the floor, and then they would then string them out to every single piece of blood so that they can get a clear image of what exact weapon was used, because believe it or not, they are able to figure out what weapon was used based off of how much blood, how many single droplets, or how much blood is together in one unit. So it's a pretty interesting thing. It is pretty nice, and it's a very interesting field to actually look into. But that is basically what a blood splatter analyst is, what they do, how they do it. And I would love to do it because I actually find a great fascination in this field, mainly because I want to help people. And I think that going into this sort of medical field for forensic science is a lot different than the basic, normal, just cop or crime scene investigator. But that is my topic on blood spatter. Thank you guys.